Welcome to episode 121, the Higher Education Bubble, Part 1, The Problem. This is an outline of episode 121. A viewer once asked, why are you doing these silly videos? And why are you giving out ebooks free? Both are legitimate questions. My purpose here is to solve two problems. Problem number one, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Problem number two, the higher education bubble. Questions. What is higher education bubble? Why is it a problem? Well, I will let Peter Thiel explain. First, who is Peter Thiel? Peter Thiel is a self-made billionaire. Also, is the most important thought leader in higher education bubble. Here is Peter Thiel, age 49, born in Germany, co-founder of PayPal, education, JD from Stanford University, one of the most famous venture capitalists. He was the first investor in Facebook. He wrote a $500,000 check to Mark Zuckerberg. Equally important, he introduced Sean Parker to Mark Zuckerberg. Sean Parker was the first president of Facebook. The Higher Education Bubble by Peter Thiel. First, the price and quality gap.
If you define technology as doing more with less, education is perhaps the most anti-technological. You're getting the same at a higher and higher price. Right. The real costs of higher education since 1980 have gone up about 400%. It's after inflation, and it's not clear the quality's gone up at all.
Why is there no resistance to price hikes?
On some level, the universities have found that they can just charge more every year, and so I think the question is maybe why has there not been more resistance to these price hikes? Failure of an imagination of an alternate future, and so talented people should all go to the same universities, learn the same things, pursue the same types of careers. And so I think we have if we had an internet bubble or a housing bubble, we certainly have an education bubble today, and bubbles are characterized by things costing more than they're worth. They're characterized by sort of intense psychosocial dynamics. So it's very hard for people to suggest that you should not go to the best college you can get into because people don't know what else to do. So again, this sort of failure of imagination of an alternate future. And bubbles are also characterized by abstractions away from reality. And
education can be one of four things. For students, it can be an investment and a consumption. For parents, it is an insurance. For universities, it's a crazy tournament.
You can say it's an investment good where you're investing in the future. You can say it's a consumption good, like college is a 4-year party. I think most of the parents and students think of it actually as an insurance policy where you're buying this the students don't fall through the really big cracks in our society, and we should be asking some big questions. But then I think from the point of view of the colleges, it's not an insurance policy at all, but it's sort of a crazy tournament.
And can it be changed? I mean,
the tone, historically, I think the tone has been set by the top universities. They have these enormously rich endowments, and they are incredibly resistant to influence from the outside. And so I do think it's the kind of thing that's very hard to reform from without.
College debt in the 21st century is like the indulgences of 15th century Europe.
One of my friends has characterized the university system as the atheist church, which is sort of a successor to the Catholic Church. It's sort of universal, and that the university system in 2014, it's like the Catholic Church circa 1514. But it is sort of you have this priestly class of professors that doesn't do very much work. People are buying indulgences in the form of amassing enormous debt for the sort of secular salvation that a diploma represents.
Education teaches conformity.
Well, there is a incredible conformity. People often end up deciding collectively to all try to catch the last wave. And so they've done these studies on business schools where people systematically tend to go into the fields that are just about the wrong ones. And it leads to this sort of herd-like thinking that's always...
and hardship for the middle class.
It is nevertheless, I think, heading towards a crisis of sorts where it simply no longer works for the vast majority of middle-class students who are amassing enormous amounts of debt going to college. And so there is going to be enormous pressure. It's kids graduate from college and move back in with their parents. That was not part of the deal the parents had implicitly signed.
The change will come from outside, like the Reformation.
And what I think is very similar to the 16th century is that the Reformation will come largely from outside. I think the first move will have to come from outside because you have sort of systems that are so far decoupled from what actually makes sense. They're so bought into a system that just does not work.
The success of elite university lies in selective criteria.
And therefore, if you look at how well do people do who graduate from Harvard versus people who just have a high school diploma, and let's say they make, it's assumed that this is prima facie evidence of how great the Harvard education is. When I think the reality is much more that it's a super selective selection effect, and so there's selection, there's signaling, relatively little sort of value-added learning.
Peter Thiel's mantra for success, with or without higher education. First, find something true that most people disagree. Second, work passionately on it.
There are very different things you can do. You know, the question, what truth do you know that nobody agrees with you on? The sort of career version of this is, what are you really good at?
What have I learned today? What is higher education bubble? Who suffers from this bubble? Lastly, the change will come from outside. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave your comments and questions below. My next video will be Higher Education Bubble Part 2, the solution. Wishing everyone peace and prosperity.